Okay, hey, I'm Isaac. Definitely, these are all pretty short, but I'll be around all week, so if you guys have any questions, just please come up and find me, or we can hang out and not talk about this. Yeah, so this is basically a short, I'm going to do this short little performance, and then Vlad and I are going to talk. And this is a talk that I've tried giving a few times, because I've found that it's very difficult to sort of explain what I'm trying to do. And one thing I've really liked about this conference so far is that everybody I've met, when I ask them what they're working on, they always have like a really hard time explaining it, which to me is like a really, really good sign, because it means that we're like all trying to do things that are super weird. Yeah, so this is called Space Puppy, maybe. Yeah, here we go. I've been seeing a lot of rainbows lately, like everywhere. Not just in opal, glitter, or those reflective signs, but when I squint my eyes, look at my hair, or glance out a window. It doesn't really matter how small or how faint they are. Whenever I see a rainbow, I stop, breathe, and fall into the magic of that spectrum. I've been trying to figure out exactly why this happens, and this is the closest I've come to an explanation. You see, when I was a kid, I used to stare at the sun. And I'm sure everyone who is listening to this has done it. And if you're anything like me, when your parents told you not to do it, that it was bad for you, that you would hurt your eyes, it made me want to do it even more, until my pupils hurt, until when I looked away, I could see that strange glittering void trailing my vision, a bit like a frame buffer that hasn't completely cleared. The sun was so beautiful, but I could never really see it. My eyes would water, or my head would start to throb, and that pure white sunlight would remain out of reach of my comprehension. But when that light hit a prism and dissolved into a rainbow, that I could understand. The lens, the raindrop, the window, whatever the medium of dispersion was, the prism took this single beam, too majestic for me to understand, and parsed it down, distributed it smoothly across the full spectrum of visible light. The white light of the sun is too bright, but when I can translate it so that I'm viewing it with more of my human facility, with the full capacity of my mind and senses, I can understand it a bit more. But this doesn't just happen with sunlight and rainbows. It feels like it happens when I look into a petri dish through a microscope, zoom into my street and Google Earth, or see the moons of Jupiter through a telescope. No, that thing that I comprehend isn't just sunlight. It's something else, something bigger. That thing is so far away and so hard to grasp. It is deep, pure, and beautiful, but it is so big that I can't tell exactly what it is. It feels alive even though I cannot comprehend life at its scale. It feels like that thing dances, that it sings. It feels like that thing feels. Sometimes it's frightening, almost gory, but other times it's so small, helpless, and fragile. It is both bigger and smaller, scarier and more comforting than I can possibly imagine. It feels like this thing that's some sort of like space puppy. Like a space puppy, but I can't understand it, I can't describe it, and every time I try to explain it, I can't find the right words. I mean, space puppy? Stories feel like they're born of this same understanding. They seem to address truths that are too much to understand all at once and could blind us if we stared at them for too long. However, stories can take these truths and unfold them, so that we can look upon them with our fleshy eyes and still understand something that we had not understood before. They move us closer to that distant thing, letting us see folds and furrows that we had not before. And by showing us those parts, stories bring more of that thing, more of that pure white, infinitely massive light into existence. Now, a story isn't just a single word, and a song isn't just a single note. The best telescopes themselves have a plethora of lenses. They take the light and they bend it in different ways, refract and abstract, bounce and reflect, so we can understand it more deeply. I feel like it's the same with art. It's pieces that do this that I end up coming back to again and again and again. Akira, Nausicaa, Burial, Holy Other. They don't just unfold. They unfold their unfolding, refracting light again and again and again, so every time I choose to let them transport me, I get to see that unreachable cosmic doggy from places I had not before. Now, this doesn't just mean that more is better. There's a very particular balance these objects engage in. Simply splitting light as quickly and as much as possible does not mean that that splitting will mean anything. Will allow you to see the unique and holy parts that make up the whole. The lenses must be placed perfectly, each with intimate knowledge of their location and purpose. The arrangement of these prisms, materials, motifs, and scenes must be orchestrated, tended. Those pages in Nausicaa, the small murmurs and crackles in Burial, can't just be themselves, but must be part of a whole, working together to construct some sort of meta-prism, which diffracts light of a different order. That order of light is so much brighter, more difficult to articulately bend, and can so much more easily fall into babble, insanity, nihilism, and blindness. But when those small pieces miraculously align, it brings us closer to being able to human eye comprehend that intergalactic canine, turning an even further what could be into an even more majestic what is. I like thinking about precious opals when talking about this emergence. They are, after all, quite a miracle. They form in the rarest of conditions. Over millions of years, a silica-rich solution is deposited in the cracks and voids of a surface. As the water table rises and falls, the silica is concentrated more and more and more. These small spheres of silica build up and slowly form an opal. The spheres act as a lens, diffracting light at a microscopic scale. But it isn't just the presence of these spheres that causes the brilliant scattering of light we see in opals. The arrangement of the spheres is as important as the spheres themselves. It is only when conditions are just right that the spheres grow to the exact size needed. It is only then that they will diffract light in a way that makes it play, dance, and move. So often, when we strive to create opalescent art, we fall short. So many times in my own work, I can see the individual silica spheres, but they aren't aligned. They just form another piece of opaque opal, apathetic demo, or in this case, convoluted speech. In 8th grade, my family took a trip to Nevada to go to opal mining. It had been a dream of mine, and after begging my family for years, we finally made the trip to one of the only places in the United States where precious opals form, Royal Peacock Opal Mine. It was a pretty sweet deal. You pay a set amount and you just break open these pieces of moist clay all day, searching for those precious points in possibility space where the silica spheres have aligned. Many people might consider it boring, sitting there staring at desaturated clay, maybe even painful, the sun beating down, crisping your flesh. But I sat there smashing clay, digging with this handheld pickaxe, getting really, really bored. Getting really frustrated, even hopeless. I've been waiting so long for this, planning for it, preparing for it. The fact that I couldn't find a single one of these opals was driving me insane. And it's an insanity I know all of you experience. When you spend the entire day tweaking values for an overnight render or finishing a song, and you finally send off the command and you come in the next day, you're just prepared and giddy with excitement to witness the results. But it's just garbage. You're just expecting something transcendent, but instead it's a vulgar catastrophe, one of those images you would find on the dark corners of the internet that you can't unsee. And I actually never found an opal that day. My arms were sore, my mind fried with days from too many hours of manual labor and not enough water. I didn't find an opal that day, but my mom did. Oh my God, my mom did, and it was such a miracle. It was this deep, translucent brown, flecks of green throughout. It was this pillar that just shone, sparkled, contained so much in it, even though it was only the size of a pinky. It was so rich, complex, and from this one angle, you could see this purple, this like deep, mysterious purple that flowed through the rock like some sort of aurora, so infinite. but so small. It was such a melancholy emotion to look upon that object that my mother had found. It's honestly an emotion that I feel every time I see a piece of art or a game that I really like. I feel so sad that I didn't make it. So sad that I could never make it. So sad that there are hard limits to my experience, that there are things which are impossible. But what's so much more important than this sadness was the beauty of the opal that my mother found. It refracted so much light, pointed towards something so much more. And the light of that thing that it pointed towards, the life of that thing that it pointed towards, just. And I feel like this is it. It's so hard to know when you're going to stumble upon a prism that really makes sense. We don't create, we discover. And when we find those truths, those stories, those moments, when we spend the time to painstakingly remove the dirt surrounding them so that we can see their natural shine, we get to see a bit further. We get to understand more of that white sunlight. We get to see something that we could not see before. Those fleshy orbs inside our head can't see all of the unbelievable beauty around us. But that's okay, because nature gave us something better than this vision. It gave us a way to see this lack of sight. Not a way to see the space puppy itself, but rather to comprehend that there are parts of this pure white light that we cannot yet see. We cannot see that indescribable entity, but we can see our own incompleteness. And with this sight, we grow. That vision, that understanding of all that we are not, is painful. We don't get to be always. We don't get to see forever. It's an understanding that there is something more. Every step we take forward, every time we grow, every way we expand our vision, there will still be something more. But even though we will never reach it, in each and every step towards it, we find direction, we find meaning, we find fulfillment. It hurts to create. I know many of you are here because you need to create, because there's this thing inside of you that won't let you rest, because it wants to record one more song, write one more story, find one more rainbow, uncover one more rock in the intergalactic opal mine of our minds. It's usually a catastrophe, an opaque, dirt-covered abomination. But every once in a long, long while, we see a shimmering deep in the dirt. We dig, and we uncover a prism, iridescent and quivering with life. We get to pull it out, painstakingly remove the grains of dirt, and finally just witness the miracle as we dance in the infinite, dazzling rainbow light of Space Puppy. Thank you. Yeah, so now in sort of a different part of it, Vlad's going to come up here, and we're going to probably be a bit more practical, but maybe it'll still be weird stuff too.
Yo, cool.
Test? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yo, so yeah, it's really cool performance, dude. So I once listened to your interview for the Voices of VR, and you like explained your work in this like nice words. Like I wish my English was the same. Like, but it's so interesting to hear thoughts behind your like projects. Like I just wonder, like, I really like think like this way when you create like some experiences.
Yeah, I mean, definitely when you end up making something, this is all like after you made the thing, you know, like sort of being able to think about and describe, how you made something is such a different experience than the actual making of it. You know, the actual making of it is the actual digging in the dirt, and that's like not that interesting. You know, it just is like literally whacking the ground again and again and again and again. So it's definitely like more of a, like, when you look back on it after and you're able to be like, oh, like that was a really important time in my life, or like I remember like making that and it was really cool, but I know that when I was making it, I probably was just like, why doesn't this code work? Like, why is there another bug that I have to deal with right now? So it definitely is looking at it after makes it sound cool, but I don't think during it is that cool.
But what I really like about your stuff is like I really believe in this, like really like art piece when art can say for itself that you don't have to explain like the art to people, and with your works is like really a thing like that, you know, like, and it's so interesting, like when I kind of play the experiences, I kind of had my thoughts, and when I listened to your interview, like I was like, oh, that's really interesting the way you think about this, but it was definitely enough to just kind of come up with your own meaning.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, like, one thing that I like saying about especially a lot of art, that, you know, if you need the placard on the side of the piece of art to explain the art, I'm totally okay with that. You know, like, I'm totally okay with having to explain the art, but then the explanation is part of the art. The entire piece is sort of the art piece plus the explanation. And to me, like, a lot of the things that I want to describe, I don't really actually know how to say with words. And a lot of the things that I want to describe, sort of, there aren't very good words for, or sort of the act of using these like very crystallized, logical word things makes it almost like can destroy the truth that you're trying to say. You know, I think that it's very difficult to use words in a way that doesn't make it rigid, or doesn't make it feel like you can, like you understand the thing. You know, like, words are meant to help us understand. And a lot of the emotions that I want to explore are the ones that are like specifically of non-understanding, or specifically of like, well, I don't really know exactly what this means, but it like feels this certain way. It's like very nebulous, and I feel like that's difficult to do with words. So it's more, it isn't that I wouldn't like to be able to explain things, you know? I would love to be able to have the placard. It just is that, like, out of necessity, I can't really use them sometimes.
It's really interesting, like, because I believe like all art is like sort of like a reflection of subconsciousness. You usually even not noticing, like when you're developing something, you're just not even noticing. You put your thoughts there and like your mood, and only sometimes after like a year or two, you just realizing I actually felt like this back then, and like it's so interesting when people discovering it even like without you knowing this.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a lot of. I really hate when people use this sort of like suffering artist, or like artist in pain, as like this motif. But at least for me, I think that there's a lot of truth in it, because a lot of the emotions that I'm working on describing come directly from like my own pain, and the way that I have learned to deal with the pain in my life is sort of, I think, the best thing that I can share with the world, of sort of like, you know, like this picture book that I'm working on right now is just about these two sea creatures that are trying to. One of them needs to learn that the thing that they thought was theirs was actually not theirs, and they needed to share it. And sort of the point at which she realizes that, like, okay, I need to share this thing, is when she takes like this deep breath. And for me, like, just like the act of taking a breath is so important whenever I'm in a situation that is like too painful or too scary or too stressful, that like the one thing that I can do that I feel like I can share with people is just like, yo, like, just take a breath when you're stressed out. Like, please just like do that first, and then everything else should hopefully come into being. So it's sort of, I think that like Yeah, everything always is a manifestation of the things that you're going through, and I think that for me, a lot of it is I feel this almost like moral responsibility to be what, like to share the pain that I felt and to have others learn from my experience, even though everybody's pain is different. But I do think that, yeah, we all feel a lot of pain, and the more that we can learn to be present with that, and the more that we can learn to grow from that, the better.
Well, dang. I also like, I believe like that all art sort of escapism, and it's like, well, more sometimes more like particular artists like kind of have like suffer in life and trying to escape from whatever routines or life. He kind of like, or she like put it like kind of make more interesting stuff like. And I just wonder, for example, like one thing why I like your like experiences is like that they completely non-realistic. Like when I just start to get in this whole VR scene, most of the people trying to just bring the same like realistic experiences and like do it exactly like as realistic as possible, but like there are like few people who actually do completely the opposite, like your work is like it's really a thing like that you're just trying to completely escape from reality and do like completely like this artificial like I don't know fantasy world. Like why it happen like this? Like
I think that just is I can't model and I don't know how to write shaders properly, so it's much easier to just make rainbow colors. I also think a lot of it too is that like in my mind a lot of like an analogy that I like to use is sort of that I don't know if I'd use the word escapism necessarily. Like I do think that's part of it, but I sort of feel like there's two ways. Like when you're traveling, for example, there's sort of like two sorts of trips you can go on. One is sort of like a vacation, and one is like traveling. Like one is going on a cruise and just being drunk all day and just hanging out and forgetting about everything and, taking a lot of naps. And then the other one is sort of like going somewhere and experiencing a culture that is not your culture and experiencing types of food that are not your food, and like just being present with people in a different way. And that second one doesn't necessarily feel as much like escapism. It more feels like it's something so that when you return to the place where you live, you sort of bring those experiences with you and they inform the reality that you're part of more. So like especially with VR, I love the concept of like if you can put somebody in a space where gravity is up for an hour, and they're experiencing what it's like for gravity to be up, and then they come back and then like gravity's down here, then like it makes you so much more like aware or present in the fact that gravity is down here. So I really like the fact that like instead of like escaping, it more is like juxtaposing, it more is like giving, like contextualizing the reality you live in. And so for me, a lot of my work is sort of like, how can I give somebody a place that, yes, is not of their normal world, but so that when they do return to their normal world, they like bring something back with them and it informs that world and in how they operate within it.
I always was thinking like it was such a new thing like that you can actually like experience this and really feel that you're there. Like I always want to explore more what you can actually do only there, like kind of VR specific things, like to experiment with materials and with the gravity, with interactions, like kind of create things which possible only there, like that you don't have in real life. Like, and I also like I don't think I saw that many experiences like this. For example, I really like inspired by your work. Like you have all this like weird shapes and unrealistic like holographic materials and like abstract interactions and stuff. Did you do it on purpose, or you just were like whatever trying like stuff and it just happened?
Yeah, I definitely think that VR is just garbage compared to real life. Like we have so many more pixels, like the resolution is so much better. The computational intensity of like this place is, way better than most computers. And I think that for me, it's like, it's in some ways like mildly offensive to be trying to replicate reality in VR. Like there's some parts of it that are really cool, like the pool game, the fact that it sort of is like real life, but then you can play pool with somebody else from a totally different place. It's sort of, there's something about it there that's like, okay, cool, there's something that wasn't before possible. But if you're doing what this world already is the absolute best at, like it's gonna, I don't...
You can compete with that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah. There's no way that I can, make anything, even like this piece of paper is just so much tighter than anything I'm ever gonna make in VR. So I gotta make it weird, so that there is no comparison.
There is this one thing I also want to ask. Like, I remember some person told me like he was standing in a line and like to some VR experience, and then he met a business partner, and he was like, "No, I'm not gonna behave like kid, like when." And then he just put the heads on and just like pretend like he's just losing this this physical thing that he's like super business person, and like. I just wonder, like, and I really like that when people go to experiences, it's really make you like, it's like releasing you from your like physical like kind of representation. You can like be a kid and like do whatever. And I heard like from this interview you did like that you kind of also really researching that you're trying to find people's like. Even go more deeper and find these people's secret like vulnerabilities.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you tell more about this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that sort of the most exciting part about VR to me is that it's physical, and that sort of like you can make people sweat while they're experiencing your art. That's like so exciting to me, and I think that sort of like you can. I like the concept of sort of like we've had all these visual aesthetics, but now we sort of have. Physical aesthetics. So there's certain games that if you if you watch somebody and can't see at all what they're actually playing, you can sort of tell what sort of game they're playing. So if it's like raw data or one of these like more violent fighting games, they're doing these quick motions. And there's like a very specific emotion that we feel when we move in these physical ways. But if you're going to make somebody like crawl on the ground, for example, which you totally can do if you just like put a little hole, like everybody will crawl through it. You're making people move their bodies that will by default create new emotions. And so sort of like that's really, really exciting to me. And sort of like it's really exciting, especially because you can teach people nuance. So I think that sort of like a lot of the way that we interact with computers and digital media in general is about this like weird like power fantasy where we have like this absolute control over that world, and we sort of can, with Photoshop we can move things left a single pixel or move it up a single pixel or undo as many times as we want, and it's all about sort of like pretty violent control. But with VR there's these ways in which you can make people move slowly or smoothly. So like with Blarp, you can't actually like fling the thing. You have to slowly pull it around, and it makes it so that people have to like begin dancing and moving in much more like calm or peaceful ways instead of sort of getting to like be the one in control of the computer. So I think that that's definitely like one of, if not the most exciting part about VR to me.
No, that's super interesting actually. Like, so you rather like kind of focus on like the psychological design rather than even visuals. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. But the visuals are psychological, right? Everything's just pointed towards making you feel a certain way. Okay, cool. Yeah, questions.
One of the hottest talking points about VR is the capacity or incapacity for empathy, and I want to hear your talk or your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think that there are some parts about it that are really cool and allow us to put ourselves in positions we would not normally be in. I read some article recently, and the title was something along the lines of like, it's offensive to think that you can have empathy with a refugee when you put on a VR headset. Yeah. And I really like that piece because it's true. I think that's sort of like a problem that we see a lot is sort of like when we take a step in a direction, we think we've arrived at the destination. And I think that's sort of like it is important to know, like, in like I've learned a lot from watching VR docs, and they're some of the only pieces of 360 video that have actually been moving to me. But I think it's really important to say, like, okay, but it's just a 360 video. Like, okay, but this is just a new piece of technology. It isn't like we can like now know what it is like to be somebody else. But it does move us in that direction, I think, in some ways. But I think that, yeah, if you're moving in a direction but think you've reached the destination, the important part here is movement, not even necessarily direction. Yeah.
Cool. Is there another question? One more.
So first, thanks for sharing your insights. It was very interesting. I have a question for both of you because what I really enjoy about both of you or your work is this feeling that I always get that it's kind of the other way around that a lot of other people approach VR and digital media, in which you take your aesthetics and they feel like they come bottom up, like they come out of the technology instead of forcing like some vision on it. You said like I can't model. And so I rather like let the shader, like let something emerge out of the shader or something. And yeah, I just wanted to put you a bit in that direction and hear the discussion between you guys about that.
Yeah. I think, yeah, there's a really interesting, like the one I usually go to for that is when people talk about like immersive storytelling, and especially a lot of people like from Hollywood will come in and just be like, okay, like I'm gonna tell this crazy story and it's gonna be in VR, and then you try the thing and it's like, okay, this actually isn't really a compelling story in VR at all. And so for me, like it definitely always, like the only piece that I've made so far in VR that I really feel like is like kind of relevant is this one called Loon. And it sort of is like, I've been saying it's like a haiku or something, but it definitely has a progression. It definitely has a story. It's a very ambient and not specific story, but there's definitely an arc, and it definitely, like I definitely feel like it's a story. But what's interesting about that one is that one I started by first making a cloth simulation. So I just literally was doing like GPU physics for like 2 months. And I finally made the cloth simulation, and then I was like, okay, well, what do I do with this? And so then it was playing with that thing, and then I was playing with it for a while and like doing these things where like I build a pillow for it, and then like doing another thing where I'd sort of like, swing it up and down. And then at some point in time I was like, okay, like, oh, now I know what the story is. Like, you're going to do this, you're going to make these pillows, this thing's going to come down, you're going to be really scared of it, and then all of a sudden it's going to become a cloth, and then you'll watch that thing slowly fall away from you and wish that you were still with it. So, like, I think it's really important to sort of like be able to make this super fluid where you have all the, like, you're trying all these things and nothing's really coming out of it, but you just try all these things and you have this, like, substance. And then all of a sudden, when that spark happens, it can just like crystallize into an actual piece. But you need to sort of have this thing with all of the minerals so that when the crystal starts forming, it can go like whoop all the way up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Come say hi afterwards. I'd love to meet all of you.